and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And today we will be discussing Nona the Ninth, the third out of 4 books in Tamsyn Muir's Locked Tomb series. But before we get to that, Sarah, what's something great that happened recently?
Something great that happened recently. I spent 2 weeks in Portugal.
Hey, that's nice.
Really, it was like a week and a half, and I spent a couple of days in Barcelona too. But either way, very excellent.
I feel like you can round up. That's acceptable.
Yes. Europe. I spent 2 weeks in Europe.
There you go. On vacation.
Well, I was working.
Fair. But you were working in Portugal, so.
Yes, I was working in Portugal.
Well, I won't be anymore by the time anyone listens to this, but today is the day that Baldur's Gate 3 finally released in full, so I have taken a couple days off of work, and Daniel and I are going to be doing that for a little while.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of Baldur's Gate release day to record this episode.
I almost canceled. We haven't gotten out of early access content yet, because we played during the early access, or at least during the first year of early access, and logged about 120 hours in that.
That's a lot of time to log.
Yeah, it's a good game. So I'm very excited to hit new stuff. And even the early content has changed a little bit, but not a ton yet. We're still pretty early. I did have to go to work today for a little while.
Boo.
I agree. So what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking wine.
Me too. I'm drinking red wine, which is the blood drink, which kind of fits for this book. But really, there's a lot more bones than blood. And there's not really a bones drink. Milk, I guess.
Milk, yeah.
White Russian.
I could never drink that, not even for the sake of being on theme.
They're good. They're just way too much work and too many ingredients.
They're too sweet for me.
Well,
I do not like them.
I'll have yours, and if you ever get one forced upon you.
Yes, I will give it to you.
So other than this incredibly long and slow book, have you read anything good lately?
I did a lot of reading, actually, in Portugal. I blazed through the Lavington Windsor Mysteries series. It's 3 books. I'm not actually sure if book 3 is out yet, but it comes out in August, by Alice James. And they're basically Sookie Stackhouse, but British. And they are so much fun. I absolutely adored them.
Nice. What makes them Sookie Stackhouse? Just the main character, or the sort of mystery novel / romance novel thing?
Kind of. The premise where vampires and other paranormal things have just been revealed to the world, recently revealed to the world. Our heroine is a necromancer.
Fun.
So she is an estate agent by day, or a realtor by day, and then a necromancer by night. She has very steamy encounters with various men and vampires in each book. There's a murder that needs to be solved or figured out. Bad guys are after her in each book. It's very Sookie Stackhouse vibe with more Britishisms.
Well, sounds fun. You know how I tear through the True Blood novels, so.
Yeah, I am going to insist that we read at least the first book, which I think is Grave Suspicions? Grave something. They all start with Grave. I know there's Grave Suspicions, Grave Secrets, and Grave something else. And one of those 3 is the first book. And I am going to insist that we read it for the podcast next year.
Well, I look forward to it. I didn't. No.
You didn't?
Sorry, I know exactly what you're about to ask me. No.
To be fair, Nona is a pretty long book.
Yeah, I'm very glad. We went camping last weekend, and so I spent several days doing almost nothing but read, which was good.
Yeah, I actually brought Nona to Portugal because I was like, I'm going to read Nona on the plane home, and then I'll be all caught up for our podcast reading. And I did not read Nona on the plane home.
It is a pretty dense book. It's not light plane reading at all.
Yeah, I found that I just couldn't concentrate enough on the plane. Mm-hmm. There was too much going on, between the noise of the plane and everything. This book needed more brain power than I had.
Oh my God. So I'll start by saying I enjoyed this book. It's well done, but yeah, it's a struggle.
Yeah, I kind of struggled too. I really liked it, but it was also really hard. And boy, did we mess up by not reading them all together when the series was complete.
Yeah. Oh, really quick. This is the third book in a series. We will be spoiling Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth during this conversation, if we remember any of those events to spoil, but we probably will, at least something.
At least something. Yeah, I did not remember anything that happened in those books. I had to go and look at the Wikipedia pages.
I should have done that, but I was camping, so I turned off my phone. The internet says that Alecto the Ninth, which is the fourth and final book, comes out October 10th. So anyone listening is probably good to start reading the series now. That's a reasonable time frame.
Assuming that Alecto the Ninth does end up being the final book in the series.
It sounds like that plan has not changed. Even like reading the author's note at the end of this book, Alecto has always been the end, and Nona sort of came into existence in the middle.
Yeah. So in theory, you're okay.
Yeah. But yeah, holy shit. So one aspect of these novels that does turn people off is that they're kind of supposed to be confusing and overwhelming in some ways. This came about in Harrow the Ninth with all of the there's second person and some perspective switches with that. And then in this book, there are some dream sequences and I guess also perspective things that make it kind of wild. And in general, I have fun with that. And sometimes it's exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that those two things are contradictory. I have fun with it, but it's also exhausting.
Yeah.
And it definitely does mean that if you don't remember what happened in the previous books, you're going to be very lost.
Also, okay, Gideon the Ninth has a cast of characters at the beginning. Where's my cast of characters for this book? I think it's because you're not.
It exists. No. It exists because that's the list of people that Nona would invite to a birthday party.
What?
Yeah, there's a list of people that Nona would invite to her birthday party, and that's basically the cast of characters.
Oh.
The guest list.
I see.
I mean, you don't get a lot of details about any of the characters.
Oh, no. I needed the characters from the first book too, because they are referenced and come up a lot.
Okay, yeah, fair.
This is not helpful. There are more dogs that never appear in the text than there are anyone else.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. You don't get a lot of descriptions of any of the characters, but you do get a list of characters that you are introduced to in this book.
That's not true.
Yeah, it is.
Are all of these new?
Technically,
okay, maybe all of these characters are the new ones, but that is not all of the characters in this book.
I think all of them are the new characters because there's the line about "and you three," and the three in question have been introduced in previous books.
Right.
But I think that everyone else on the quote unquote guest list is new to the series.
Yeah. I know. I had a note that you immediately teased me for, which is fair. But at one point I was like, Commander Wake keeps showing up, and I feel like I'm supposed to know who that is, but I have no fucking clue. And eventually we get more of her names, and I'm like, okay. I now kind of vaguely remember who this is. But I wish I had my other two books with me so I could have looked at those character lists to at least kind of place the names.
Yeah. Again, I looked at the Wikipedia pages. Well, I looked at the Wikipedia summaries for Gideon and Harrow before reading Nona, and then I went back and referenced them from time to time when I was really lost about who was who.
Basically, whatever your method, this is a book that needs a study guide.
Yeah. I also will say that I think Nona the Ninth is the only, or like these books, but Nona in particular, are the only books where I have gone back to the Wikipedia page afterwards to make sure that I knew that I actually followed along with the plot correctly. I did, but...
Oh, no spoilers, but that last scene is so hard to follow.
Yeah.
But again, it's supposed to be hard. So at some point, I'm okay with just turning off my brain and going, all right, let's see where this goes.
Yeah. I mean, like, it is very intentional, which I like, but I also wanted to make sure that I did understand what had happened after I finished the book.
That's fair. Something that Muir has done flawlessly in all three of these books so far, in the midst of all of this confusing shit, there's also some element that is very vague, but also crystal clear what it is supposed to be far earlier than it's actually explicitly told to you in the book. I would say a good example of this is the second person aspect in Harrow the Ninth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Muir doesn't come out and say that the second person narrator is Gideon. Also, we warned you that there would be spoilers for those books in this, so that's on you. But it's pretty obvious pretty early on that that's what it is.
Yeah.
Similarly, in this book, it's pretty obvious very early on that Nona is in some way Harrow before it's actually told to you.
Well, but she's spoilers.
We'll talk about that later. I said in some way.
Okay. I mean, I feel like talking about that is still kind of a spoiler, but
well, everyone talks to her like she's Harrow.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not sure.
All right. That brief, extremely spoilery conversation aside, I'm sure the listeners heard some kind of bleep tone or something. One thing that was delightful and infuriating about this book were the names. So Nona has this thing where she can comprehend any language and learn any language. That's introduced pretty early on, and no one's really sure why or how this happens. So then we get some really cool things, like she refers to people by the like translated definition of their name instead of their actual title name. The only example I can think of is a spoiler.
I think that example, I think she is going by Crown and not the other name.
But there have been other times when people correct her and say, that's not that person's name. And then in dialogue, we'll hear them be called something, whereas Nona's referring to them as something else.
The only thing that I can think of is there's one point where she essentially mispronounces someone's name and she gets corrected. But otherwise, maybe I was reading too fast. Maybe I was too jet lagged. But I'm not sure that I completely agree or noticed that aspect of things.
Interesting. Because then we transition to, there are some people with wild ass names in this book.
There are some wild names.
And so how many of those are verbatim their name versus what I thought was Nona's strange interpretation of it?
I always thought it was just their name and that people have weird names in this book.
These are wild ass names, though. Just going from her guest list at the beginning of the book, because that makes it not a spoiler, we have names like Crown Him with Many Crowns and Commander We Suffer.
And We Suffer, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I just took that as these books are wild and some of these characters have really weird ass names.
The kids in the gang, the like 4 through 14-year-olds who Nona hangs out with because she's, would you say, magically developmentally delayed?
Yes.
Yeah. Their names, I thought, are probably just wild ass names. Like Beautiful Ruby and Born in the Morning.
And Hot Sauce.
Yeah, Hot Sauce was great. But I don't know. Okay, I thought that was a vague, undistinguished thing. Or maybe I was reading too far into it.
I think that you were reading too far into it, but I also would be willing to believe that I just didn't catch something.
It could go either way. I would love to hear what everyone else thinks about that.
Yes, send us your thoughts and comments.
Well, it's hard to have too much of a non-spoilery conversation about this book, huh? As told by our immediate descent into spoilery conversation.
Yeah. This book is just so weird. And I say that as that's a compliment. That's not a negative thing. But it does mean that it's hard to not talk about spoilers because everything is just so weird.
Yeah, because you can't really tease apart any one aspect of it without immediately tugging on the end of the book.
Yeah.
I will say, I think with Gideon and Harrow, the books, not the characters, I had a pretty strong opinion that people who didn't like it we're just not trying hard enough. And this book, nah, I get it. You know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe.
Okay, I can expound on that, but that's also a spoiler. So let's just get going.
Are we just gonna go straight into the spoilers now? We'll have like
have to
10-minute non-spoiler section. Are we gonna talk about, before we do that, why you should read this book?
Oh, I suppose we should talk about why you should read this book, huh?
Yeah, but before we move into the spoiler section, I mean, I think you should read this book if you enjoyed Gideon and Harrow, because
yeah,
this is the third book of the series, and if you've enjoyed the first two books, you might as well give the third one a shot.
Yeah, that's a weird question for partway through a series.
A little bit.
I mean, definitely start the series because it's weird and fun and wild, and stick with the series, but maybe choose to when you know you're going to have the time and patience to actually sit there and untangle it. Or be okay with not being able to untangle it, which was my method.
Yeah. Or just don't leave 6 months in between reading each book.
I think that was part of it, but I think there was also some mushy stuff.
I think there's some mushy stuff, but I think that the mushy stuff would have been a lot less mushy if we had not had 6 months and however many books in between.
It's almost like breaking up a series into multiple books is a bad choice.
You're saying that you want to read this as one 2,000-page book?
I think I would enjoy it more if I did. Or, okay, it could be in multiple volumes. The physical aspect is not the problem.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that you don't mind series, you just want to read them all at once.
Right. And you can only do that if you wait until they're done to read them.
Yes.
Which is when you argue, but if you don't buy the first book, then the rest won't get made.
Which I think is a valid argument. I mean, you can also buy the books and not read them until they're all finished.
That's nuts. That I know a lot of people buy books with no intention of reading them, but I cannot bring myself to do that. Yes, I do own books I have not read, but like that was an accident. Saying I'm going to buy this book and then just hold on to it for 5-10 years. No.
I mean, I don't do that either. But if you want to ensure that a series is going to be completed, buying the book is the best way to do that.
I hate that. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I hate it.
Yeah.
And it's bad.
I mean, I agree. We agree there. But capitalism.
Well.
This episode is brought to you by Bones.
What do you do for your skeleton? The remainder of this episode contains spoilers. All right, the most important participant or invitee to Nona's birthday party is...
obviously Noodle.
Noodle was the greatest.
Obviously Noodle. I love Noodle. I would die for Noodle. Noodle will forever be in my head a 6-legged pug, even though that's like contrary to the description of Noodle with curly hair. I don't care. Noodle is a pug. R.I.P. Noodle the pug.
Noodle doesn't die.
No, but Noodle the pug.
Oh.
It is dead.
Yeah, I see. Noodle the poodle is also pretty good, though.
I'm not familiar with Noodle the poodle.
Well, I thought Noodle's description was similar to that of a poodle.
Oh, yes. I think Noodle's description is closer to that of a poodle than Noodle the pug. But I hear the word noodle in conjunction with dog, and I think Noodle the pug, even when the noodle in question is 6-legged and alien.
I'm glad you specified in regards to dogs so that I could not tease you about thinking about pugs when you eat pasta.
I do not think about pugs when I eat pasta, no.
More importantly, you might die for Noodle, but Nona would live for Noodle. And that scene was so wonderful.
It's true. I loved that.
She is driving this bus through the underworld and was like, everyone I care about's dead, or at least like halfway there. I should just crash this whole thing and take everyone out of their misery of existing in this world without the people I love. And Paul, I think, at that point, the like mesh between, was it Camilla and
Palamedes?
Palamedes?
Yeah.
So also, they're really not dead, but, you know, Nona's having a moment. But
Well,
Paul is...
they're kind of dead because Paul's a new person. Paul's not either Camilla or Palamedes.
Paul has their memories.
Yeah, but Paul's also like his own person.
Nah, the memories make the person. Paul is both people. I'm not getting into a philosophical debate about this. I know there's the whole like, oh, if teleporting destroys you and recreates you on the other side, are you really the same person? Yes. Oh my God, of course, yes. That's so stupid.
But I can understand why Nona thinks that Camilla and Palamedes are both gone, because Paul is his own person. Like, he might have their memories, but he doesn't react the same way they would. He doesn't act the same way they would.
That's true. He acts like some weird combination of them. But saying, oh no, I only have this changed version of my loved one means I might as well kill them is a nutso jump to make.
Nona is being very dramatic.
Yes.
Like, no argument there. But this whole book is about Nona being dramatic.
Is it?
Or that's not what the book is about, but she's pretty dramatic throughout the entire book.
Interesting. I wouldn't describe her that way. She's in some pretty over-the-top situations.
Yeah, but she also has over-the-top reactions to everything.
She has, like, youthful, naive reactions, maybe.
I think that her reaction here fits into that. We can disagree about terminology, but I think that she is acting very consistent to how she acts throughout the entire book.
I don't know about that. We're getting far away from the fact that Noodle saves the day, or the fact that Noodle exists. Paul can tell that she's descending into this spiral and just goes, you know, Noodle's in the bus, right? And she immediately flips and is like, I must save everyone, or at least Noodle, meaning therefore everyone.
I mean, obviously Noodle is the important one.
Yes.
Secret king of dogs. Something I really enjoyed about this book was seeing more of John's story, John being God or the Emperor, and I honestly didn't remember much of him from the first two books.
Well, he's not in the first one at all.
I think we see a reference to him at the very end, but no, he's not really in the first one.
Well, in the first one, they talk about God a lot, but it's a very abstract religious thing. So then in the second book, when you find out, to quote a song, God is one of us. That was a very fun twist there. Yeah.
I was looking through in an attempt to figure out what was going on in this book. I was looking through my notes that I had taken for the first two books. And I do have a note for Gideon speculating that God was not going to exist. The Emperor was not going to exist. Obviously, that was very wrong. But anyway, so John, God/Emperor, and we see in these dream sequences that intersperse the book, we see more of his origin story, essentially. And I really enjoyed seeing how he, I would say, kind of devolves into almost being a villain. I don't know if I would quite call him a villain, but he does some pretty villainous stuff.
He does some bad things. He plays the role of a villain. So we have found out earlier that John invented necromancy when the world went through a catastrophic event and everyone died. And so he invents necromancy to bring everyone back to life.
Except,
I know. We find out that it's more complicated than that in this book.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, yes, there's a catastrophic event happening. The world is clearly like pre-apocalyptic. Bad things are happening. He starts off with very good intentions, but he is the one who blows up. Like, he kills the Earth.
That's true, but the Earth was going to die anyway.
But not everyone on it was going to die necessarily, and then they all do.
But the only way to get off of Earth was this ship that the rich people took and like left no escape pods for anyone else, basically. And so there was no way off. Yes, that was John's understanding of the situation. He could have been wrong.
I mean, I thought my reading of it was that he recognized that maybe there were some, like, maybe it would have been possible to figure out another solution, and he just decided that that was too difficult, and he was angry and he was just going to blow everyone up.
I don't think it was difficulty. I thought it was time. They could have figured out a solution, but because all of their original resources going into the solution got diverted to these rich fucks, they no longer had enough time to come up with a different way.
I thought it was difficulty because no one was willing to work with them. Like, they were getting tied up in bureaucratic nonsense.
Well, they got shut down before any of the necromancy stuff.
Right, right. But even after the necromancy stuff started occurring and like they made that known to the world, they were tied up in all of this bureaucratic bullshit.
Oh, that's true. I was saying if it was the necromancy's fault that no one would work with them, then you could say, well, then it's John's fault for inventing necromancy and telling everyone about it. So my point is that they would have gotten shut down even without John's actions.
Right. No, and I'm not saying that, like, that's not my argument. My argument is that he could have looked for a solution that was not, I'm going to explode a nuke and like kill everyone off.
But then well, he could have. I guess, okay, obviously I don't think he should have killed everyone on Earth. But there is something beautifully poetic about killing all of the people who tried to save themselves and leave everyone behind. Now, the catch is that he only got one of the ships. One of them is still out there, I believe.
Yeah, and
But I understand him saying, well, fuck you guys. Then I'm going to kill you. And then when that fails, the basically tantrum of saying, well, fuck this, I'm going to kill everything. That is not a good decision, but that is not like a villainous plan to destroy the Earth.
I don't know. I think if your tantrum involves setting off nuclear bombs, that's pretty villain level. That's maybe not like intentionally evil, but that's pretty villainous.
I mean, yes. Practically, yes.
Yeah.
In the real world, yes. This isn't the real world, though. This is hypothetical book world.
I don't know. I think in hypothetical book world, that's pretty villainous still.
He basically euthanized Earth.
Well, he didn't. He euthanized everyone on Earth.
Right.
He stuck Earth's soul in a body. So Earth itself is still living, in a sense.
That's true. But anyway, I would agree that he does bad things, but
I don't think he sees himself as a villain.
Well, okay, so then do we want to throw all of the dreams into question and say he's an unreliable narrator and that's not actually how it happened? I don't think that's what the book was trying to go for.
I don't think that's what the book was trying to go for either. I mean, I would believe that he is a slightly unreliable narrator because he has a god complex, but
is it a complex when you are God?
I mean, I think it still counts as a complex.
All right.
But I don't think that the book is trying to make us question like his depiction of events.
Yeah, I felt like that. All right, interesting question then. If he knew he could bring everyone back, why not?
Has he brought everyone back though? I mean, he doesn't. Like, he brings back the people he likes, but he doesn't bring everyone back.
He didn't bring everyone back. I think it's specifically said he brings back millions, but not billions to solve overcrowding or whatever.
So I think like at that point, you're still choosing who lives and who dies.
I think that's the shitty thing, playing favorites of who comes back.
Yeah, but I think that still counts as villainous.
Villainous.
Yeah.
A villainous act. Yes. I'm going to push back on him being a villain.
I don't necessarily think he is a villain, but I think he does some pretty villainous things.
Sure. But like how gray his character is what makes him interesting, in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, like, I don't disagree. But I just, like, I think that it was really interesting to see that development in his character.
Reveal.
Yeah, and to see how, like, in the beginning of these dream sequences, he has really good intentions, right? Like, he has no expectation or no plan to do anything like this whatsoever. He just wants to save the world. And then the way that he goes about doing that is pretty darn awful, actually.
I would argue he does not save the world. I don't believe that you can classify the world as saved.
No, I don't think. No, yeah. I don't think that he actually does it. But the way that he goes about trying to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do kind of really enjoy how vague the creation of necromancy is. We get a lot of really precise information about how his original project is how to cryogenically freeze people for deep space travel so that they can shoot off the population of Earth into space to escape the dying planet, right? But then throughout this cryogenics research, So they discover that the corpses he was working most closely with don't decay after the power is shut down to their project. And then after a couple of, we don't know how long, after some tests and some research, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, suddenly he can control their bodies. And then suddenly he has necromantic powers. And that's kind of hand-waved away in a way that I really loved.
Yeah, I enjoyed seeing that development too.
It gets so into the nitty-gritty of how the magic works. Like, him learning to control it and the escalation of small acts to larger ones. But how it just started was, I don't know, he did experiments on them, regular science experiments on them, and then was around them a lot.
I mean, I thought the implication was that Earth liked him and gave him necromancy abilities.
That is what she says at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Earth / Electo / some other A name. What did he call her? Not Andromeda.
I think there's a mention of an Annabeth.
And he calls her Annabeth, yeah, which was weird and confusing.
I thought that she was not Annabeth, though, because I thought that Annabeth was like Harrow's ancestor.
Well, there was the first of Ninth House, who does have another A name. Hold on, I think it's on like the very last page. Electo stabs John, and then John says, Annabelle, good morning.
Yeah.
I think that's implying he's talking to Electo. That doesn't mean the book is not fucking with us on purpose, but I feel pretty confident in that reading.
Yes, no, I agree with you.
Anastasia is the ancestor.
Oh, where did I get Annabeth, though?
Annabelle,
Annabelle,
whatever. Yeah. Because I was saying Coronabelle until I realized it was Coronabeth. So, whatever.
So if you put together Coronabelle and Annabeth, you get two actual characters. One of the things that I like, but is very confusing, is that in these dream sequences, John is talking about all of these different people, and he refers to them, well, probably in the dream, he's probably saying the full name, but we only hear, possibly Harrow only hears, or Nona, or whatever, only hears the first initial. And I really like that, but it does make it very confusing.
So I believe that's because it's implied that Harrow regresses to Nona because she learned something she didn't want to know. I'm sure it's more complicated than that, but we get like some dialogue to that effect, or not dialogue, but narration, internal dialogue to that effect.
Yes.
And previously, when Harrow has erased someone from her memory, i.e. Gideon in the second book, she overwrote Gideon's name with Ortis and then heard a different person named Gideon as their name being Ortis. And then everyone was confused why she was calling Mr. Gideon Ortis, but that's because Ms. Gideon was deleted from her memory, and so the name was as well, and Ortis just overwrote all instances of that name. So, are those close friends of John's, close friends, like the inner circle, I think he even calls it that.
Yeah, I think he does too.
They're the first lictors, right?
I think so.
I'm pretty sure the letters match up.
Yeah, that is my understanding, is that they're the lictor pairs.
That's a great example of one of those things that is pretty obvious, but never stated outright. So you get to feel like a genius for figuring out something that has kind of been spoon-fed to you.
Yes. But with a book this complex, I appreciate that.
Man, I'm going to take the wins I can get.
Exactly. Like I need to feel like that in order to keep enjoying this book.
I almost started Gideon the Ninth after finishing this book. Like, just one to the next. Like, now I want to know what was going on back here. I didn't because I had to prepare for Baldur's Day, but...
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
I am thinking that when Electo comes out, I'm not sure if I'm going to reread the first 3 books before reading Electo, or once I read Electo, we read Electo, because obviously we're going to read it for the podcast.
Obviously.
Although not this year, so it's not going to be related to the release of the book. And we will not remember anything that happened in the first 3 books.
I would like to try to reread them beforehand.
Yeah.
If this book was any indication.
Yeah, I would like to. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think at the very least, if I don't reread them before reading Electo, I think I will go back and read them after reading Electo, because I think it would be interesting also to see what you pick up in the previous books, having seen the end.
Yeah. Even just the little, like, tiny mini mystery. It's not a mini mystery. It's the whole fucking point of Gideon the Ninth, is the mystery of how to become a lictor and who's murdering people.
Yeah.
But that becomes such a small part of the bigger picture. I'm very excited to reread these books.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Tamsyn Muir is brilliant. And I think these books are really intricately plotted and very well done. I don't always follow it, but like, I think they're excellent.
Oh, I think she's playing 5D chess.
Yes.
And we are just left in the dust.
Yes.
Speaking of the ninth house. So there are 9 houses. The ninth house is obviously the home of Gideon and Harrow, and kind of Nona, if you think about it.
In a way.
It's crossed out, which I loved that.
Yeah.
Like very small typography. On the pages where the title of the book is, the 9th of the title is crossed out. So it's just Nona. Small details. So good.
I also, slight detour, really loved Nona's name. Comes from like her saying no a lot, but also Nona Gessimus. Yeah. Like excellent.
Where was I going with this? Oh, throughout the first 2 books, well, in the first book, we discover that all of the children of the 9th house died of a flu, and the only 2 left were Gideon and Harrow. I almost called her Nona. Gideon and Harrow. And then we find out that no, Harrow's parents murdered all of the children of the house in order to cast a spell in order to conceive Harrow. And then at the end of this book, we see children in the house. So, like, does that mean whatever spell they cast has worn off? Or maybe because Harrow has kind of died and been reborn with the whole lictorhood thing, like the ramifications have worn off? Like, I have so many questions.
I don't know. I mean, they do talk about someone who looks as young as Honesty, who is one of the gang members on the planet that we first meet Nona on.
I like to throw out their quote-unquote gang. They call themselves a gang.
Yes.
They are rough and tumble kids who do crime because this is a dystopian world, but they're also like 12.
Yeah, I mean, like they're good kids. They're not really any older than 14, but they call themselves a gang. So quote unquote gang.
I think the youngest, Kevin, is in the gang. He's the youngest, and he's supposed to...
Kevin is like 7.
Even 7? I thought like 5.
5, 7. He's very young.
Someone has to take him to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's very young.
True. Anyway, so the narration describes one of these young people in the 9th house as looking around Honesty's age. And I thought Honesty was one of the older kids. Obviously not old, maybe only like 12, but also there hasn't been 12 years have not passed since Harrow like ascended to lictorhood. So I don't think that it would have anything to do with Harrow becoming a lictor.
Let me confirm. I think the sentence is no older than Honesty.
Okay, but that still implies kind of around Honesty's age. Pass the pike on to a rather gloomy-looking girl who looked not much older than Honesty.
Okay, so the opposite of what I said.
Yes.
Okay, anyway, we have no idea how much time has passed because the second book, first of all the characters are immortal because they're all demigods. And there's also that long period of time where Harrow is sort of not with it.
It's true. We don't actually know how much time has passed. I was assuming, I mean, based on nothing at all, honestly, I have been assuming that it has not been 12 years or however old Honesty is. But I guess in theory it could be.
Oh, this very helpful Tumblr user, Dark Veracity, that's the most Tumblr-ass name I've ever heard. Everything is phrased in time before the Emperor's murder, which is very helpful. Oh my god, this is the most useful thing I've ever found. Okay, well, this is great. I'm going to assume it's accurate, because anyone who took this much time knows their shit.
Bookmark it for when we read Electo.
So Gideon becomes Harrow's cavalier 1 year before the Emperor's murder. Okay, yeah, so it hasn't been that much time at all.
Yeah, so that is basically about the time frame that I was thinking.
Okay, so then, but I feel like in the first book, Gideon is like, the only young person on this planet besides me is Harrow. Everyone else is old as hell. Is she an unreliable narrator and they're not actually all 80 and maybe some of them are 40 and she's just 19 and can't tell the difference? Maybe.
I would also believe that she's 19 and ignoring the 5-year-olds.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Although I think she has to be older than 19 because Hera was 19 and Gideon was not killed during the child sacrifice, as you mentioned, or didn't die, even though she was supposed to be sacrificed. So she must have been alive before Hera was conceived.
Yeah, but not by much.
I was thinking a year or two, maybe.
I thought they were pretty close in age.
So she's probably like 21.
Yeah. But also like 21-year-old Gideon, yeah, ignoring the 5-year-olds. Definitely ignoring the 5-year-olds.
Wow, I do not remember much of the second book. Or, I mean, I remember a lot of the second book, but there's so many people and which exact person did which betrayal is...
I remember the second book a lot better than I remember Gideon, probably because we read it a lot more recently. And I feel like Gideon also had more characters, and a lot of those characters died off early and then came back, and I didn't remember who they were.
Oh my god, the moment when suddenly all of these dead people show up, or previously thought dead in the underworld, they're dead.
They're dead.
Show up in Harrow, I was like, I had already accepted that I didn't need to remember any of them. What are you doing to me? I'm going to send you a link to this, though, because it's delightful.
Yes.
So you're not just watching me read this, but I am sure going to spend a lot of time with that later.
Understandable.
I almost want to put it in our show notes.
I kind of think we should.
One thing that was fascinating in this book is that it's the first time we get an outside narration of Gideon. Gideon the Ninth, Lady Gideon.
Who is now Kiriona.
Right. So that makes it even more complicated because Kiriona is presented so differently, or at least I interpret very like abrupt and rude, which I realize is exactly what Gideon was, but because we had her internal monologue, it was much more fun and charming. But then also, Gideon has been resurrected and kind of changed. So, like, how much of that is the different perspective and how much of that is her actual character changing? I don't know.
I definitely took it as, like, she's been resurrected, but she also had this kind of weird meld with Harrow that didn't really work, and she didn't necessarily come back correct, like, entirely the same. So her character is genuinely a little different.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you overall. Because even if she is a little bit more abrasive, a little bit less warm, we just don't see her with anyone she would have been warm to.
Yeah, I mean, and
so, like, this is her prickly outer shell, if nothing else. But it was very fun. That was a very fun. Because in the first book, it's first person from her. In the second book, it's second person from her. And this is close third person on Nona.
Yeah. I wonder what perspective we'll get in Alecto, because it hasn't been consistent from book to book.
Yeah, which is very fun. That's my favorite part of the series.
Yeah, like I think that's brilliant, to be clear, but it makes me wonder what kind of point of view we're going to get in the next book.
Yeah.
We're running out of points of view.
Future tense.
That would be wild.
The whole fourth book will be in future tense. I'm calling it.
You know, I actually could see that book doing that because these books play with language so much.
That is probably my favorite part about the series. Muir does wild shit. And even the things that don't get pulled off perfectly, or that fall a little flat, or that I didn't love, she was still trying something weird and cool and different. And that's fantastic.
Yeah. I remember actually in the first book, in our discussion about the first book, complaining a little about how modern the language was because I found it really jarring because I wasn't expecting it from this book. And I think actually in retrospect, like it fits really well, especially given what we know about how modern day or, close modern day Earth
future
fits in with the story. I think that it would not bother me on a reread.
Well, like we say, it plays with perspective and language, it also plays with genre. Like the first book is very much fantasy. They're necromancers, they're casting spells. You get a little hint of science. They ride on spaceships, but that's about like all we get.
Yeah, it is fantasy in a space setting.
And even that, like the space setting is very minor because the planets we see them on are very, very fantasy. There's a tiny bit of technology in Canaan House where the first book takes place, and they get transported there on spaceship. Like that's it. Everything else is so much magic. The second book pulls so sci-fi, still with like a magic core, but it's more like, hey, maybe magic is another element of science that we didn't really know about yet, which is sort of supported by the John flashbacks in this book.
Yeah.
The God King flashbacks, whatever. And then in this book, you get that sort of dystopian future. There used to be technology, but it's kind of in disrepair because they're on this, not refugee planet, but basically.
It is a refugee planet.
Okay, it is a refugee planet. It fits within the world, but because it's such a narrow slice, or I should say, it fits within the universe, but it's such a narrow slice that the world of this book still feels very different. And all three of them have, really.
Yeah. Yeah, each book in this series has felt distinct, but also felt cohesive, which is hard to pull off.
Especially considering how wildly disjointed each book is within itself.
Yes.
Well, not the first one, because it's all from Gideon's perspective. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the fourth book.
I am too. I'm looking forward to it. I've been very confused, but I've really enjoyed reading these 3 books. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us, or agree with me. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at FictionFansPod. Is it still called Twitter? I don't know. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
We're still calling it Twitter. Anyway, we're also on Blue Sky, and we just got an invite to something called T2, so we're on that as well.
We're basically everywhere.
We're like a disease. We're everywhere, yes. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Speaking of everywhere, we're also on Patreon, where you can support us, find our show notes, and a lot of other nonsense.
Do you want to hear about cat vomit? No, cat diarrhea?
Yeah, worse.
That'll be on our Patreon too. Thanks again for listening, and may your villains, including God, always be defeated. Bye!